September 17, 2024. In Beirut, the capital of Lebanon, the day began like any other. People hurried through the streets, the city buzzing with everyday life. Around 3:30 in the afternoon, a Hezbollah fighter felt his pager vibrate. A strange error message flashed on the tiny screen. He pressed a button, and in that instant, the device exploded in his hands. At first, it seemed like a freak accident, something that could be brushed off as a technical failure, but within minutes, then hours, the same blast started happening across the country. One pager, then dozens, then hundreds of them went off, turning into deadly traps for their own owners. Panic spread quickly. Hospitals were filled with the wounded, and the number of victims grew at an alarming pace. It soon became clear this was no coincidence. It was a coordinated attack targeting Hezbollah fighters. Investigations pointed to the Mossad, Israel's intelligence agency, as the force behind the operation. For years, they had been preparing for this moment. And the shocking question is, how did they manage to infiltrate the supply chain and turn ordinary communication devices into weapons against their very users? Through this operation, Israel struck a devastating blow against Hezbollah, its most dangerous enemy. And now we'll break down the story step by step, how the plan was set in motion, and how it all unfolded on that day of explosions. But before we get to how the Mossad pulled off that daring exploding pager operation, let's first ask, why did Israel decide to deal so ruthlessly with Hezbollah, led in 2024 by Hassan Nasrallah? The thing is, Hezbollah is a long-standing, implacable enemy of Israel. From the moment it formed in 1982, this movement of Shiite clerics declared a single, brutal goal: the destruction of Israel. Their leaders talked openly about wiping the country off the map and forcing any survivors to go back to Germany or wherever they came from. That, in the radicals' view, was what Free Palestine meant. But Hezbollah was not just a band of fanatics. It had a state sponsor: Iran. According to U.S. estimates, Iran poured as much as $700 million a year into the group. Syria also provided money and weapons. With that backing, Hezbollah became a parallel state inside Lebanon, members in parliament, its own TV channel, Al-Manar, schools, hospitals, and most importantly, a powerful armed wing. By 2024, estimates put Hezbollah's fighters at around 100,000, more than the regular Lebanese army. Faced with an enemy like that, Israel saw little room for negotiation. Plans to neutralize Hezbollah and its leaders were being developed in Mossad headquarters for decades. Today, this organization is recognized as a terrorist in many countries around the world. Tensions exploded after Hamas's attack on Israel on October 7, 2023. The very next day, Hezbollah opened a second front, firing from Lebanese territory. Over the following year, they launched roughly 1,900 rockets at Israel. The country's north lived under constant threat. Dozens of towns and villages were evacuated, and more than 60,000 people left their homes. Hezbollah targeted civilian neighborhoods, infrastructure, and military sites. Israel found itself fighting Hamas in Gaza, while also fending off sustained attacks from the north. And so, nearly a year later, in September 2024, Mossad carried out one of its boldest missions. The main goal was to decapitate and cripple one of Israel's most dangerous foes. But the big question remains: how did they manage to plant explosives directly into pagers and make the fighters carry those devices in their own pockets? Today, many people have forgotten what a pager even is. In the 90s, it was a small pocket receiver for short messages. It didn't make calls or record video. It only received. Somewhere in a control center, an operator typed a short text, the system sent it over the radio, and in your pocket, you felt a beep or a buzz and saw a tiny screen with a few lines. Sometimes it was just a phone number to call back, sometimes a short phrase or a code. The link was one way: no microphone, no camera, no GPS. That had advantages: almost nothing to leak, batteries lasted for weeks, the device was cheap and simple, and it worked where phones often didn't. It's no coincidence that pagers are still popular in hospitals. Now, about Hezbollah. After October 7, 2023, Hassan Nasrallah pushed for total secrecy. A smartphone, he argued, is a mole in your pocket. Geolocation, metadata, messengers, cloud backups, All of that can be intercepted, analyzed, and used to target strikes or raid teams. In February 2024, he publicly ordered, "No phones. Turn them off, bury them, lock them away." That was the message. The ban applied not only to fighters, but to their families. Fewer screens, fewer digital traces. What replaced phones? A return to the old tech, pagers and simple radios. The idea was clear. If a device only receives, it's harder to track. If the network is simple, it's harder to hack. If the battery lasts a month, you don't have to risk going out to charge it. These devices don't run the internet, and they don't expose you to constant notifications or apps. It seemed like the perfect low-tech tool for an underground group. Quiet, reliable, cheap. That's why, by spring 2024, pagers were spreading through the organization. Short codes, group broadcasts, minimal digital noise. The logic looked sound: remove smartphones, remove the biggest vulnerability. Only one weak point remained: the belief that simple equals safe. As later events showed, that confidence turned out to be the trap. The pager attack in September 2024 was no improvisation. It was the result of years of work that began a decade earlier. We only learned about that preparation recently. In an interview on the program 60 Minutes, two former Mossad officers agreed to reveal parts of the story. Their faces were masked and their voices altered, and even so, it was a bombshell. For the first time, people directly involved pulled back the curtain. One of them, identified on air as Michael, said it didn't start with pagers at all. The first test was radios. Seemingly ordinary tactical radios that Hezbollah fighters had used for years, but inside the battery pack, Israeli engineers hid small explosive charges. The radio, in other words, became a weapon, outwardly harmless, deadly at the right moment. Israeli agents managed to infiltrate the supply chain so well that Hezbollah itself bought more than 16,000 of those devices. Years went by, and the devices sat dormant. Israel waited for the right moment, tested the systems, refined the technique, and watched how the enemy grew comfortable with the gifted communications. It was a long phase, nearly a decade of preparation. Later, it became clear that the battlefield was changing, and radios were not always with the fighters. For regular, steady contact, militants increasingly turned to good old pagers, cheap, simple, with long battery life. That's when Mossad moved to the next phase. The goal was no longer a single device in the field, but a mass communications channel that Hezbollah used every day. So a 10-year intelligence buildup around radios became the foundation for something bolder, blowing up thousands of pagers all at once. When everything is ready, the idea sharpened, the devices tested in broad terms, the most delicate stage begins: getting the enemy to buy exactly what you want them to buy. In this story, the key was not a single clever move, but a whole staged commercial reality. Fake companies, plausible advertising, friendly sellers, and a person who passes the product from hand to hand. All of it worked like a scene on a stage. Participants in the operation spoke about this openly in the 60 Minutes interview. One former officer, introduced as Michael, explained a simple detail. They did not know they were buying this from Israel. This was not just talk about secret channels. It was an admission that an entire network of middlemen and the appearance of legitimate deals had been created, so buyers would have no doubts. Intelligence used a shell game, shell companies that were hard to trace back to the real sponsor. "We create a pretend world," another participant called Gabriel said in the interview. "Shell companies over shell companies. We create a pretend world. We are a global production company. We write the screenplay. We are the directors. We are the producers." In plain terms, hiding behind the economy and imitating normal business was their workshop. In that world, there was also a brand that looked familiar. The name Gold Apollo appeared in the commercial story, and through a chain of middlemen, the product was sold as if it came from an independent manufacturer. Gold Apollo had zero idea it was dealing with Mossad, Gabriel said. By the same logic, Mossad hired a seller known to Hezbollah under the Gold Apollo name. She gained trust, and the first batches arrived as gifts or upgrades, free or sold at attractive prices so users would not suspect. At the same time, advertisements were made, brochures printed, demo stands set up, everything like a reputable manufacturer. Robust, dustproof, waterproof, Long battery life, selling points that field users value. That marketing smoothness served one purpose. Nobody expected a covert operation behind familiar commercial language. According to reporting in the New York Times, shell companies were used to hide the intelligence involvement, in particular BAC Consulting and several other shells, which masked the real supply chain. The pager device itself was also specially prepared. The explosive element was carefully built into the battery pack, about 3 grams of PETN, placed so ordinary checks, including disassembly and X-ray scans, would not reveal anything suspicious. The New York Times also reported that such implants were extremely hard to detect and that the charge could pass routine security checks, for example, at airports. Sources said tests were carried out on dummies to calibrate the charge, to achieve injury to the person holding the device while minimizing harm to bystanders. Lebanese sources cited by Sky News reported that Hezbollah ordered roughly 5,000 pagers. Separately, Israel said that over 16,000 radios, via its channels, had earlier been sold to Hezbollah. Those volumes made pagers and radios a mass communications channel inside the organization. Once trust was won and devices spread through the units, all that remained was to wait for the activation moment. D-Day came on September 17, 2024. Life in Beirut and its surroundings seemed normal that morning. Traffic jams on the roads, shops open for business, and a noisy market buzzing in the southern part of the capital. But at 3:30 in the afternoon, everything changed. One Hezbollah fighter in the city's southern neighborhoods felt his pager vibrate. A strange error message flashed on the tiny screen. He pressed a button to clear it. And at that exact moment, the device suddenly exploded. At first, it looked like an accident. But within minutes, the same thing started happening across Lebanon. The pagers Hezbollah had recently acquired in large numbers were going off one after another. In Beirut, in the Bekaa Valley, in the south of the country, and even beyond Lebanon's borders, in Syria, including parts of Damascus. It all began like a normal message. Someone typed text into the system, and the signal spread across the city. Pagers in pockets and clipped to belts picked it up, buzzed, and showed on the screen. New message. For the owners, it looked familiar and safe, but hidden inside was the trap. The devices had been altered in advance. The harmless signal became a detonator, and the ordinary screen turned into a trigger. At the moment someone tried to read the message, the pager exploded right in their hands. What was meant to be a tool for communication suddenly became a weapon. Many owners were caught completely off guard. Some heard a sharp beep, followed by the words, "You have an important message," on the screen. To read it, you had to press 2 buttons at once. That guaranteed the device would be held in the user's hands, right in plain view. And that was the moment it detonated. Later reports confirmed that even Iran's ambassador to Lebanon, Mojtaba Amani, was injured when his pager went off this way. The explosions didn't stop with just a few cases. They continued for nearly half an hour, rolling through neighborhoods in waves. Panic spread. People tossed their pagers into the streets, while hospitals descended into chaos. More than 150 hospitals across the country reported a flood of casualties. The Ministry of Health urgently advised everyone to get rid of the devices and called on medical staff to rush in and prepare for a national emergency. For Hezbollah, it was a blow of unprecedented scale. The communication system they had trusted as a safe alternative to smartphones collapsed in a matter of minutes. What was supposed to shield them from Israeli surveillance had turned into a weapon of destruction. And although in the first hours no one officially claimed responsibility, to many the answer was obvious. Mossad was behind the attack. Israel's intelligence services had been preparing for this moment for years. And on September 17th, it was finally set into motion. September 18th, 2024, exactly 24 hours after the first strike, a second wave of attacks followed. If the day before it was pagers that blew apart, this time it was the radios. Around 5 in the evening, almost simultaneously across different parts of Lebanon, new explosions erupted. This time, the devices went off in Beirut, in the south of the country, and in the Bekaa Valley. Within minutes, it became clear these were not random technical failures, but part of a carefully staged, multi-phase operation. The consequences of the second attack were just as striking. Several residential buildings caught fire, cars and motorcycles went up in flames, and civil defense services reported dozens of calls. In total, Firefighters logged more than 70 incidents, from small shops and workshops to an entire battery warehouse. Even during funerals for Hezbollah members who had died the day before from pager blasts, fresh explosions went off. It looked symbolic. The enemy wasn't giving the group a chance to recover, pressing forward and methodically dismantling its communications. One particularly troubling incident happened near the American University of Beirut. A suspicious device was discovered in an ambulance. The Lebanese army had to carry out a controlled detonation right on the spot, while Hezbollah supporters blocked journalists from filming the scene. The Lebanese Red Cross deployed about 30 ambulances to handle the crisis. But the key point was this: Hezbollah's communications network kept collapsing in real time. The devices that blew up were portable radios, specifically the ICOM ICV-82 model, widely used by the fighters. Later, the manufacturer in Japan stated that production of this model had ended years earlier, and the units in Hezbollah's hands were most likely counterfeits. That same night, reports appeared in the press that not only radios but other electronics had exploded as well, for example, biometric fingerprint scanners. It remains unclear whether these had been rigged in advance or simply caught fire in the wider chain of blasts. By the end of the second day, Hezbollah had been pushed into complete chaos. Loss of communications, fires, confusion among fighters, and even attacks on UN peacekeepers in Tyre. All of it showed that the organization had lost control. The Israeli operation that began with pagers had turned into a full-scale demolition of its enemy's infrastructure. The pager and radio operation turned into a nightmare for Hezbollah. Official reports said several dozen people were killed, while the number of wounded reached into the thousands. Most of them were fighters, exactly as Mossad had intended. One former agent, introduced in the 60 Minutes interview as Gabriel, explained the strategy plainly. The goal wasn't to kill Hezbollah fighters. If he's dead, he's dead. But if he's wounded, he has to be taken to the hospital, treated, resources must be spent. And these people become living proof across Lebanon. It's better not to mess with us. Israel wanted to leave not just a physical scar, but a psychological one. A daily reminder to its enemies of the reach and superiority of its intelligence services. There were even claims that some of the blasts happened right before the eyes of Hezbollah's leader, Hassan Nasrallah. At the time, he was in a bunker with close aides when several pagers went off nearby. Rumors say Nasrallah watched as his men were knocked down by the shockwave. 2 days after the attack, Nasrallah, famous for his fiery speeches, delivered an unusually restrained and flat address. Those who heard it immediately noticed the change. If you looked into his eyes, he was already defeated, Gabriel said. His own fighters saw a broken man. That became a turning point in the war. The operation went exactly as planned. The exploding pagers hit only those holding them, while bystanders were spared. In this way, Israel carried out a precise strike against Hezbollah's fighters, crippling their communications network and shaking the organization's morale. But one part of the plan didn't go as expected. According to Turkish media, Turkey's National Intelligence Agency intercepted a second planned attack just days later. At a transfer point in Istanbul's airport, a shipment of 1,300 pagers and 700 chargers headed for Lebanon was seized. Inspectors discovered explosives and highly flammable liquids hidden inside. By stopping the cargo, they prevented a fresh wave of detonations and more potential casualties. After the wave of pager and radio explosions, the situation quickly escalated to a new level. Israel launched massive airstrikes against targets across Lebanon. The peak of the campaign came on September 27, 2024. Reports said that on that day, the Israeli Air Force struck an underground command center in the Dahiya district and killed Hassan Nasrallah. The death of Hezbollah's leader became a turning point, after which the conflict began to move toward an end. 2 months later, both sides agreed to a ceasefire, though sporadic clashes and violations continued. Still, Hezbollah was not completely destroyed. As Gabriel admitted in his interview, the answer to whether the organization was fully broken was no. The operation delivered a severe blow to the chain of command, lowered morale, and forced Hezbollah to ask for a truce, but the structure as a whole did not vanish overnight. Parts of its apparatus survived, and the network tried to rebuild. Even so, Israel achieved many of its main goals. Its greatest enemy, the terrorist organization Hezbollah, was seriously crippled. But at what cost? Around 4,000 people were injured during the attacks, and it remains unclear how many of them were actual Hezbollah members. Among the victims were likely civilians and minor affiliates, far removed from military decisions. The world remains divided. For some, this was a successful operation by Israel against a deadly enemy. For others, it was a cruel act bordering on terror. One telling moment. During his trip to the United States in February 2025, Benjamin Netanyahu gave President Donald Trump a commemorative golden pager. According to reports, Trump replied, "That was a great operation." And what do you think? Do you believe that the end justifies the means? Share your thoughts in the comments, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to like the video. Thank you for watching.